This is bread. Okay, so this is bread that you buy at the store. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be making homemade bread. Now, it's going to look different, it's going to taste different, it's going to feel different, but it's still going to be bread. Also, it's like a kitty. Ow. Not really. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with today's recipe. Okay, you may have a printout, you may have this on your phone. Simple and easy yeast rising bread. So there's really only 4 ingredients that we have. That's it. Flour, all-purpose flour, salt, fast rising or quick yeast, and water, and we don't need the water yet. And so let's go ahead and make sure we have our items. We should have some bowls, we should have our cups, our measuring spoons, we should have a knife. This is for scoring, but it's also for something else. And let's go ahead and get started with the salt. It looks like that we need 1 teaspoon of salt. Okay, so I've checked here. I got my 1 TSP measure. We're going to add our salt. Okay, if you ever get too much on here, basically just scrape it off the top and put it in the bowl. Okay, now it says we need 2 2 1/4 teaspoons of instant or active dry yeast. All right, so let me tell you the difference between fast rising, instant, and active dry yeast. Okay, fast rising or instant yeast means we can just add it immediately to the batter or to the dough. Okay, we don't need to do anything special to it. If it was active yeast, we'd actually have to put it in warm water first and would have to bloom. Well, we're not going to fool with that. We're just going to go with this. So take your little knife and we are going to cut this open. And we are going to get our yeast. Okay, it's already here in the container. Just going to go ahead and fill it up. Okay, and here is number 1. Okay, get a little low here. Okay. Here's number 2. And then we're going to have to open up the second one for our last little bit here. So it's basically comes out to 2 1/4 teaspoons. Okay, and you are not going to use all of your second pack. So you're just going to seal it back up with like a paper clip. You need to keep it in a nice dry area because it's still good. Or if you feel really ambitious, go ahead and make a second loaf of bread later today. All right, so there is our first, there's our yeast and our salt. Let's go ahead and go to our flour now. Okay. Okay, so just like our Mad Lines, we are going to scoop the flour. Now, you are not going to sift this flour. I did a version of this where I sifted it earlier, and it was a very unsuccessful experiment. The bread turned out very chewy and very dense. My children still ate it, and so did I, but it was not a light, fluffy loaf. All right, and so we're just taking the big spoonfuls of flour here, and I'm just going to go ahead and level this off. It is a bit messy, but well, I'm doing this for the camera. Okay, so 1. Okay, oh, and you are going to be having 2 1/2 cups of total flour. Okay, so let's get one more scoop in here. I'm clearly having issues with my cleanliness, whatever. Okay, there's 2, and lastly, we'll get that 1/2 cup in. Okay. All right, and we got our 1/2 cup in here. Okay, and we got our 2 1/2 cups. Now, we're going to go ahead and just do a quick stir on this, and then we'll move into the next step. So we're just going to stir this for about 15 to 30 seconds. We just want to get the yeast, the salt, and the flour kind of blended together. And I'm just using my plastic bowl here and my spatula. And once you've blended it together, you think you got a nice good mix. Try not to fling it out of the bowl like I just did a little bit. And let's go ahead and stop here. And let's go ahead and move to the kitchen and talk about what. All right, so here we are with the water. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna turn on the hot water in the sink, and I'm gonna wait for it to warm up. And I need exactly 1 cup. Now, here's what you have to understand. When you add water to yeast, it will activate it. Yeast is a living creature, okay? But if the water is too hot, it'll kill the yeast. If the water is too cold, it won't activate. All right, so we finally got the water to about the temperature we want. It is just perfectly warm, so I'm gonna fill up the cup. And what you wanna do is you also wanna test it, okay? It needs to be warm. It does not need to be hot. If it's overly warm, if it's uncomfortably warm, it's gonna kill the yeast, all right? So we got our warm cup of water here. We're gonna add it in. And I'm just gonna start stirring until we get a doughy mixture, okay? We're not beating it to death or anything like that. We're just stirring, stirring, stirring until it just becomes one big doughy ball. Now, if it's really dry in your house, or if you've got a house that's very humid, it could affect the stickiness of the dough. So we're just gonna keep going until it becomes just one big ball and you've got everything kind of combined. All right, so we're adding just a little bit more water to make the dough just a little bit more sticky, because we want to go ahead and get it in here. Now, this is what's called a no-knead bread, which means you're not going to have to like stick your hands in flour and knead it, well, except for when you're shaping it. And we got this nice sticky ball here. Let's give it one more good go. All right, and if it's too dry, if it's not absorbing, add a little bit of water at a time. You know, and when I say a little bit, I mean like just take your fingertips in a cup of water and just splash a little more water in there. If it's too dry, it won't rise properly. Okay, so last 2 steps before we set this to rise is I'm going to go spray a little bit of spray oil on the outside rim of the bowl, because you have plastic bowls, they're going to stick a little bit to it. And now we're going to go ahead and add the saran wrap covering to it. So we gave you saran wrap, and we want you to use it now, okay? We're just going to go ahead and do a couple kind of big sheets here. We want to make sure it is really secure, so I'm actually going to be a little more generous than I normally would on this, because we want to make sure it is sealed up properly. And so I'm going to go to every possible effort to make sure that this thing is sealed, honestly, overly good for all of it. We're sealing this up because we want to make sure that no moisture gets out, and we want to keep all that moisture inside here. And so now we got our dough inside, and here's what you're going to do. You're going to take it, and you're going to set it in a spot in your house that's not cool, like a nice, warm, dry spot. And you're going to let it set for the next 2 hours. All right, so this dough has been rising for 2 hours, and I'm going to take this layer of wrap off so you can see. You can see it's gotten bigger and fluffier and puffier. And so we're going to wrap it back up. We're going to stick it in the fridge, and it needs to go in the fridge for at least 2 hours. You can keep it in the fridge for as long as 7 days, as long as it's tightly sealed. And next thing you're gonna do, we're gonna pull it out and we're gonna bake it pretty soon. Welcome back to bread. All right, so what we have here is we have our dough. It's been in the fridge for at least 2 hours. In my case, this has been overnight because we started this late and we were tired. So I'm actually making this for dinner tonight. Now, what are we gonna do? Well, you're going to go ahead and take some flour, a spoonful of flour, on some parchment paper, and we are going to dust this right here. We're going to spread it out. Okay. You don't want to get a whole bunch of clumps in here. And now we are going to shape our bread. We're not going to knead it or anything like that. We're just going to pull this thing out. We're going to shape it into the shape that we want. Okay, so what shape do I want? Well, I'm going to go with a nice, long, cylindrical shape. Of course, I also got to make sure it fits my pan. So, got my shape here. Okay, and we're going to give a quick spray of spray oil on the pan, on the parchment paper. So this is on the parchment paper on the pan. And now, I'm going to dust this off. I'm going to lay it on here. And I am going to go ahead and use some of this excess flour I had. And I'm going to pour it into my sifter. And I'm going to sift the top of it. Now, why are we sifting the top of the bread? We're sifting the top of the bread with flour, lightly, not heavily, because we want to leave the moisture trapped inside of it. I've probably done this a little heavy. Yeah, it's close enough. And now, we're going to let this bread slide off the pan, apparently. We're going to let this bread sit for the next hour, and in an hour, we're going to preheat the oven and stick it in the oven. All right, so we got our bread. It's dusted. It's been sitting out for an hour, so it's risen. It's kind of coming to the right temperature. Now we're going to set the preheat to 450 degrees. Now, while this is preheating, you need to heat up a cup of water to get ready to put in the pan real quick. All right, so we're going to take our metal pan and we're going to put it here on the bottom shelf. And when the bread goes in, we're going to add a cup of hot water to it, and it's going to help the bread steam and get a nicer texture. All right, so here's our last step. You're going to take your knife and you're just going to score your bread 3 times or 4 times across the top. Okay. Then we are going to stick your bread in the oven. Okay. All right. Now, last thing you're going to do is you're going to pull out that bottom pan and you're going to add water to it. Okay. And yes, it's going to steam.
Add hot water.
Add hot water to it.
To a hot pan.
To a hot pan. All right. And we're going to close it up.
Very carefully. Please use a hot pad if you have one.
Oh.
Or a towel.
Yeah, maybe super carefully. And then we're going to set our timer for 25 to 35 minutes. All right, so now we're going to go and pull the bread out of the oven. Ours has been running for about 30 minutes. And here is our beautiful loaf of bread. Now, remember, we're going to let this set for about 30 minutes before we cut it. And now here's our finished loaf of bread. It's kind of soft, and we're going to cut it open. We're going to see what it looks like on the inside.
And we're going to feed it to our kids for dinner. Nice.
All right, so let's go ahead and cut myself a little piece here and take a bite and see how it tastes. That's good bread. Remember, make your bread, send me photos. Have a good day.
If it doesn't work out, you can make another loaf.
If it doesn't work out, you have enough ingredients to make a second loaf. And if all else fails, just smother it in butter, it'll still be good.